he's the wild card player that I think they've been missing a little bit. It's be very afraid, everyone, isn't it, at the moment? He wins the ball back in the opposition third. He was top in the whole of Europe.
Yeah, he's like a Manuel Lanzini, but a Rolls Royce version of him. He's
wow.
quick, he's
Can he
buzzy.
get that,
yeah,
can
exactly.
he get that tattoo?
Hello, you're listening or watching SunSport's brand new transfers show, Transfers Exposed. I'm Will Pugh. I'm joined by my mate and the Sun's deputy head of sport, Dean Scoggins. Dino, over the summer, I thought I can't possibly not be sat across you 2 mornings a week like I am every single Tuesday and Monday and Thursday even throughout the season on Tactics Exposed, SunSport's flagship and record-breaking YouTube show. So I thought, I need a quick and easy way of getting Dino back in my life. So I thought I'd take the Tactics Exposed brand, I'd change one word in it and give us an excuse to have a chat twice a week to talk about the thing that all football fans care about over the summer, which is transfers. How are you getting on?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying this summer already. Normally at this stage in our line of work, we're kind of looking at back pages and spreads and thinking, how are we going to fill them as there's no Premier League football but the transfers are hot at the moment, so it's been great. We can park England for a bit and we can start talking about Premier League clubs again.
Exactly that. Now, it might seem a weird time to start a transfers show, given that the transfer window is officially shut, having been open for a bit because of the Club World Cup. But as the back page of today's Sun will tell you, there is no shortage in big stories. I think there's only one place to start, mate, and that is with the Dan King's excellent back page exclusive today. Liverpool set to swoop for Paris Saint-Germain star Bradley Barcola, which could spend their summer spending to over £300 million. They've obviously landed Jeremy Frimpong from Leverkusen already. Milos Kerkez from Bournemouth looks like it's going to be done soon as well. But what can you tell me about Barcola?
Well, I'm excited about this one as well, and it's be very afraid, everyone, isn't it, at the moment? Liverpool win the title, sort of canter there at the end, get Salah done, Van Dijk's not going anywhere, not too concerned about the Trent Alexander-Arnold issue, go and sign a exciting fullback to replace him, probably going to get Kerkez, as you say. Wirtz is nearly over the line, and then you think, well, I'll tell you what, let's go again, and another 100 million quid-ish if it's if that's what that's what they'll need to pay to get Barcola out of PSG. Bayern Munich are interested in there, by the way.
Yeah.
But they've also looked at Isak, and seriously looked at Isak. But obviously, I think it's quite funny that the Manchester United Aston Villa game, last game of the season, where Morgan Rogers' goal was ridiculously ruled out and cost Aston Villa a Champions League place. It probably also cost Liverpool getting Alexander Isak, because that meant that Newcastle were in the Champions League, and then he's not going anywhere, and the £150 million price tag is obviously very, very large. But Barcola is fun. He's exciting. I mean, we talked about him in the Champions League show on Tactics, and if you're looking at a long-term replacement for Mo Salah, not this season necessarily, but this guy could be it.
Well, that's what I found a little bit funny about this. Let's just run through a couple of the facts and figures we've got here, right? So it looks like, as you've mentioned already, around the £100 million mark. Obviously, he's not one of PSG's first choices in that front three. Didn't start the Champions League final. Did come on, of course, set up the 5th goal, I think.
And you've got to remember, it's a World Cup year. So
exactly.
That's really important for a lot of these players.
Yeah, so he's obviously going to be desperate to get into that France team as well. You'd think he'd sort of get in even if he was still at PSG. But I totally understand what you mean. So the long and short of it is, and what we've reported in the paper this morning, is that Liverpool would still love Alexander Isak from Newcastle, but Newcastle are digging their heels in and saying it's 150 million minimum. Obviously, you'd imagine that's sort of a opening gambit negotiating position, particularly if there are going to be a few teams interested. Maybe that drops to 125, 130. That would still be an absolutely enormous fee and probably break the British transfer record, depending what the Wirtz deal goes through at. But as we've written, or as Dan King's written this morning, that he's like the plan B. Now, Liverpool fans, Newcastle fans, PSG, football fans in general might be going, well, isn't he a winger? Isak's an out-and-out forward. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but I also think there's this general feeling that Florian Wirtz can play anywhere. as an attacking midfielder, as a false nine, anywhere in the front three, and obviously so can Salah. So Gravenberch will be the midfield player, but then they've got Gakpo, they've got Diaz. What happens with Diaz and Núñez is a separate thing, but I think this is Arne Slot already laying down his kind of tactical marker that he can move things on and change it up at Liverpool already. And it's sort of like, well, you could play Salah in the middle, you can play Barcola one side, you can play Diaz the other, you can play Gakpo up the middle, you can move things around, and you could play against top-class teams. What Liverpool have done generally this year is they've had players running from midfield. So I don't think any manager's going to think it's going to give me less options, or he's another wide man. I think he could end up playing Diaz up the middle or Gakpo up the middle and Barcola one side and Salah the other, and Wirtz in behind, and that's pretty frightening, isn't it?
Yeah, that's not the worst. That's not the worst call. Do you think there is a bit of that then, sort of like future? We talk about future proofing for Salah. Obviously, it's not a 1-year deal he signed.
Yeah.
So you suspect he's maybe not going anywhere.
No, but I think the circus could happen again next year. The Salah circus comes to town again. In January and in next summer, where look.
Well, the Saudis aren't going anywhere.
No, the Saudis aren't going anywhere. Obviously, the MLS is always the sort of the grazing yard for those professional footballers as well who want another payday. And but Salah was obviously, the numbers this year were ridiculous. So it's very unlikely that he's going to hit those numbers again. But also, if they're going to manage him through a season a little bit better this year as well, I think it's fair to say he not ran out of steam. That's unfair, but he wasn't at the position in March and April that he was in November and December. And having another player like Barcola to be in there means that you can probably manage Salah's minutes a bit better as well. And again, they'll want. Liverpool this year will want to defend the title, but they want to be in the reckoning in that last four in the Champions League as well. And Fenway Sports Group and everything like that, they ain't investing in this to go backwards.
No,
this is, we're going to be here for years to come. So, and Arne Slot wants to back it up and do a pet.
Yeah, well, they pride themselves, don't they, Liverpool, on managing themselves financially within their means. Now, let's just run through a couple of these, okay? You've got £29.5 million on Wirtz's Leverkusen teammate Jeremy Frimpong, okay? It looks like 126 to 127 is about where they're going to have to settle for Wirtz as well. Plus... £40 million been earmarked for Milos Kerkez, 21 from Bournemouth.
That's a bargain, by the way. That's a bargain.
Yeah, absolutely. Rolls Royce of a player. A lot of youth in here, by the way. But there are concerns, or it's easy in this day and age, aren't there, to say, oh, what about PSR? They're spending loads of money. Obviously, they
is that an Arsenal fan shouting that out? Is that? I think that's what Arsenal fans are shouting. PSRs.
But obviously, they had quite a lot of prize money last year. I got some stats on the PSR as well. But is it very much a bit like what Fergie used to do at Manchester United? Make hay while the sun's shining and solidifying your position.
Yeah, it's got to be that, isn't it? I mean, without going into the minutiae of Liverpool's books, you win the Premier League.
Mate, I've got the minutiae.
Yeah,
right
I bet
here,
you have. Yeah, go on then. Let's have them. Let's have some of the numbers.
Right, so obviously the PSR rules state that there's a loss limit of £105 million over 3 years. Liverpool made a £57 million loss in 23-24, a £9 million loss in 22-23, but actually a £7.5 million profit in 21-22. The financial figures coming into their books this season, of course, the Premier League winnings for being champions last season, signed a £60 million Adidas kit deal. They got a Far East tour on the horizon. We know they're huge money spinners, as we saw with Manchester United's failed post-season trip to Malaysia.
We'll be selling a few more shirts in Egypt this year after Salah's gone back as well. Yeah.
Exactly, but their net transfer spend was only £100,000 last summer. So, as far as they're concerned, it leaves them in a good position.
So 200 or 300 million quid is pretty fine then, as long as they double down on what they've done this year. And as you mentioned there, it's the age of them as well. We go back to when they sold Coutinho and everyone thought it was crazy money for the 100 million. They reinvest that in Alisson and Van Dijk and deliver titles in Champions Leagues off the back of it. It's the wages are freed up. There's a couple of players there that they could move on. There's selling Kelleher as well, so there's a bit of money come in. I don't think that
18 million quid to Brentford.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is almost the statement summer from Liverpool.
Yeah.
It's spend 200, 300 million, and no, as we've seen in a couple of summers previously, you don't have to spend that much more going forward.
Yeah.
And look, Arne Slot's got a plan. They're very happy. You know, the stadium's nearly finished. The fans are all dancing. You know, there'll be more celebrations in Liverpool next year, I think.
Absolutely. It's fair to say as well that not that I'm definitely not going to say that Arne Slot got lucky, but it was the strength of competition wasn't just objectively points wise wasn't as good as it has been in previous seasons. Arsenal, Manchester City, Chelsea nowhere near it, United and Tottenham, you know, the total bottom half of the table. So if they don't want it to be a flash in the pan, this is exactly the sort of thing Liverpool fans will want to see. They will have to, especially if they get this Barcola deal over the line, or they want to cough up and go all out for Alexander Isak as well. They will have to get some players off the books. I know we just went through the figures there, but if they go again, they're sort of fine if they just do the Wirtz deal. An extra 100+ million elsewhere means they will need to offload some. You mentioned Kelleher already, 18.5 million to Brentford. A few other names on the list of potential departures. I think these ones are sort of almost certain. Harvey Elliott, Gerald Quansah, Bayer Leverkusen, apparently looking at him. There was talks, Erik Ten Hag fancied the look of them, and maybe including them in that deal. Chiesa, Nunes and Tsimikas. Obviously, Milos Kerkez comes in. Tsimikas, less of a future at Liverpool, it seems. Would you sort of make of those? Is there anyone else you think?
I think Tsimikas is an interesting one because obviously Kerkez is the long-term Robertson replacement, and so it's more a case of whether Tsimikas really wants to be there as the number 2 still. As he was probably waiting for Robertson to go, and he can become the number 1, but. Number 1 left back, that is obviously. Quansah's an interesting one. I don't see them selling Harvey Elliott. It's going to be difficult for Elliott though. Yeah, I think they'd be silly to sell him because they did quite well for injuries last year Liverpool as well, especially in midfield. They didn't lose a lot of players to injury in that area, and but Harvey Elliott only played 6 games in the Premier League. I think it was 6 or 7. They got him a couple at the end to make sure he gets his medal and all that sort of stuff. But if they have a bad injury crisis, and look, they're going to add Wirtz to that as well. But if they had an injury crisis, then they're not. They've not got a massive squad, let's put it that way. They did pretty well where clubs like Arsenal struggled a bit more through injuries in the season than Liverpool did. And so, that's why be afraid, lads, because they've just, they're going to bolster numbers, bolster quality. And I don't know if anyone's watched a lot of Florian Wirtz, but I've seen a fair bit of him. He's a superstar.
Unbelievable.
And, I think it was when he missed out on the World Cup with an ACL injury, the world didn't really get to see Florian Wirtz straight away.
It would have been like the Mesut Ozil
absolutely.
Cup,
and the Euros, Germany weren't that great, and it was all a bit of home pressure and stuff. But, I've been fortunate enough to be blessed with the time to watch a bit of Leverkusen, the Bundesliga, the last year or so. And boy, if I know, not in a million years is he going to come to Tottenham as a Tottenham fan. If there was one player that I'd want, it would be him.
Yeah, I've seen him in the Flesh a few times, Bayer Leverkusen in Europe, playing against English clubs, West Ham in particular. And the best way I can describe his style for Premier League fans who want something similar is like a Manuel Lanzini, but a Rolls-Royce version of him. He's quick, he's buzzy.
Can you get that tattoo?
Can you get better than Manuel Lanzini? Yeah. The couple of others, Dino, Diogo Jota and Luis Diaz. Liverpool not necessarily looking to get rid of those players, but will listen to offers. Darwin Núñez, obviously they spent a significant amount of money on him, 85 million quid, I think. Big wages that come with that as well, so that will help with the PSR, but it's not like you're selling a homegrown player there.
No.
It will actually, if Núñez goes...
I think you've underlined there, it's important as well, what we were talking about earlier on, is that lots of these teams, or lots of fans anyway, are sort of obsessed with this number 9 thing.
Yeah.
And, you talk about Jota there as well.
Should be,
yeah, Arsenal fans, but especially them. But they, the Liverpool had this flexible forward front line where they interchange positions, and And you look at Barcola and Wirtz, and they're the ones to slot straight in. I also, just to mention as well, Wirtz, I just love the cut of his jib as well. He's the sort of he's as if
Did we say that in 2025?
No, I do. No, that's fine. I'm older than you, I suppose. But look, I those dreams you have of what footballer you would be. I'd love to be a player like Florian Wirtz, because I think the attitude he's got as well. There was this great thing in Germany, like it was either last year or the year before, where he was asked what his best pre-match meal was. Generic question. He just said plain potatoes. and so after that, there was all these memes going around where people were putting his face on potatoes and potato adverts and stuff like that. And then he was asked again, obviously, about it, and he just said, "No, I don't like it. I don't find it funny at all." So it was like, he didn't play the game. He wasn't going along with it. And in the Premier League, he's going to get a bit of that as well. And look, there's a few stats to throw in as well that are probably unknown about him to a lot of people. He wins the ball back in the opposition third. He was top in the whole of Europe.
Yeah. And
so you slot that into Arnie Slot's, tactics, with my tactics nerd brain on again. He's the perfect fit. And as I said at the start, be afraid, be very, very afraid.
I think Thomas Souček, actually, well, not to crowbar another West Ham reference in, is the king of potato-based football banter, though. Loves potato salad.
And in with another potato-based.
All right, that's it. I think that's the cue to move on, I think. Another one on the back page of the paper today, Dino, Viktor Gyokeres at Sporting Lisbon, of course. Arsenal, Manchester United, both being linked before. Manchester United boss Ruben Amorim was, of course, manager of Sporting before he came over to Old Trafford. How much I reckon he wishes he was still there in the sun. But Martin Blackburn story, this one. Viktor Gyokeres threatened to go on strike to force through a dream move to Manchester United or Arsenal. Now, I was prepping for this show.
You dream about a move to one club or the other? That's the only thing I would say about that. But
exactly, yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, well, go on then. What would you do? What would you do?
Well, Arsenal, hands down. I mean, I'm hoping this section was going to go on a little bit longer, if I'm honest. But no, I'd definitely do Arsenal. Doing the prep yesterday, I was sort of writing it all out as Manchester United. Looking at the paper this morning, Martin's gone all Arsenal as well. I know there's been links before, but Arsenal looking at Sesko. Before we get onto that, what do you make of this Gyokeres situation? Basically saying he's going on strike because he feels that Sporting have gone back on a gentleman's agreement, I hate that phrase, that they had last summer, that they would let him go for 50 plus £8 million in add-ons and not told him or not demand the £85 million release clause in his contract. What do you think?
I think it's refreshing to begin with that a club like Sporting, as a massive club that they are actually open enough to say what they think, which is great because we don't see that very often from football clubs. And look, Gyokeres' agent has been fairly vocal in all of it as well. He's a player that scored that many goals, it's 60 plus goals in last year. Why would you just roll over and have your tummy tickled and allow him to go? Like, they've got to dig their heels in and say, this is our value. Yes, great. They're not. And the quote actually says, "We're not stupid. We understand that it's 80 million is a big ask in the new world of PSR for a release clause, and when they've got a player,
27-year-old,
and they've sold they've sold players, and they got rid of the manager or lost the manager that this player was playing under. So again, they don't want an unhappy £80 million on asset on their hands next year who might not do the same thing again, and then all of a sudden people are coming back with £25 million bids. So look, I think it'll get done. He'll be in the Premier League next year, and I like the way Arsenal are going about this as well. Andrea Berta, the new sporting director, is doing his work quietly. And he's going behind this. As I say, I'm contradicting myself there because I said I like the way that Sporting Lisbon have been open about it, but they're the selling club, right? So I like that Berta's going about. He's not strutting about like some of the people at Manchester United and other clubs have done previously, and peacocking and showing we've got money to spend and blah blah blah.
If people don't know, sorry, Berta's the new Edu, basically.
Yes, he is. And he's also he's a different type of character that you'd expect to be at the top of a Premier League club. He's quiet. He's kind of unassuming. He's an absolute gent, and he's going about things in a way. It almost feels to me like they're going to let Man United do the dirty work and then come swooping in at the end. And, we've seen teams do that before, And as long as Gyokeres wants Arsenal, as we said just earlier, then it will be. It sounds like it's going to be Gyokeres' choice. I think.
But surely that relies on Arsenal a little bit with the Sesko deal. They seem to be playing the field quite nicely, Arsenal. But just on Gyokeres quickly. So Federico Varandas, Sporting president, after it appears that information's coming from Gyokeres, saying that there was a gentleman's agreement for this 50 plus £8 million deal. Sporting, the Verandas as there, he's saying, Sporting will not accept blackmail and insults. You should know me better by now. Now, for Gyokeres, Rio Ferdinand, I think, who's saying, I wouldn't want him at Manchester United because I don't think physically he can cut it. 97 goals in 102 games for Sporting is a fantastic return, of course. But Ferdinand making the point recently, just saying, I've watched enough of him. Lots of them goals, he doesn't get those opportunities in the Prem because of the physicality. Playing style-wise, I'm saying Arsenal just from a player point of view because I think the project's more exciting and I think Manchester United, is the end of people's careers or sets players and managers back. Recently, I'd go to Arsenal, but just from a club point of view, do you think he'd be sort of worth that 70-odd million it's going to cost?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's he needs to have a good start, which is because this whole thing about not scoring enough goals where he was before and being at Coventry and the journey he's been on, but you can't seriously watch him in the Champions League and play Sporting games and not think this guy's a good player.
I think Rio meant probably more about his time in Portugal.
Yeah. I think look, it's obviously it's easier to score goals in the Portuguese league than it is in the Premier League. But to go to playing style, Ruben Amorim has been so stubborn in the way that he's got Man United set up. He's playing 3-4-3 as he did at Sporting. He wants strikers who can score with one-touch finishes and bully their way into the box, and this is the guy he says can do it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about a style perspective from Gyokeres. And for Arsenal, they just need a number 9 who is going to put those chances away that they've missed, which have, let's be honest, potentially cost them 2 titles.
100%,
because if they had a 25-goal 9 in those 2 years, I'm not downplaying the Havertz role. He's been outstanding, but all of a sudden in games you're going to have Havertz, Odegaard, Rice, a striker, and 2 wingers coming at you. Then it's a completely different entity. And I think he's a very, very good player. I'm not going to say for a second until he scored 25 goals in the Premier League that he's in that top level of striker, and we should not be comparing him to Erling Haaland or anybody like that until he's had a couple of seasons in the Premier League. But he's a beast physically. He's a bigger, more muscular unit than he was when he went to Sporting. He's worked incredibly hard, and it's time for him to get his Premier League chance. And look, I think it'll be funny from a supporter point of view if he goes to Man United, because it'll almost be like
funny for supporters of who?
Well, no, I just mean from anybody who doesn't support Arsenal or Man United, because the pressure goes on him straight away. It's like, really?
If he goes to United,
does he think he's the one that can take United from 15th in the Premier League back into the top? And and the whole circus that goes with everything at Man United. I think if he goes to Arsenal and they buy another winger, wide player with a bit of X factor about him, then he goes in there with a view that I'm going to knock the ball in the back of the net with all these chances that Bukayo Saka and Martin Odegaard give me. So yeah, look, I think he fits into both systems. It's exciting from the Premier League that we're going to get another high profile and big character, big player, be in the news pages next year.
If you are Berta then and you're in charge of all of this, and it comes down to it that there's a deal on the table for 2. Benjamin Sesko at RB Leipzig been told by his national manager, don't go to Saudi yet. This is a national manager who has worked for Al Ittihad in Saudi.
Don't chase the cash yet.
He's exactly that. He was very careful to not disparage his old employees and go, it's a top quality league, but anyone around him will advise him not to do that yet. This is Sesko. If you've got a choice, because I think the money's going to be there or thereabouts, give or take 10 million or so. If you're Berta, or at United, I suppose, who do you want out of the 2?
I think that Gyokeres is more of a statement for Arsenal, more of a statement signing, because it's almost like for Sesko, it's Arsenal and that's it. From a playing style point of view, I just think it's a presence at 9 that they're after. So I don't think it matters too much, and I think that whichever way it pans out, Arsenal and Man United will tell you they got their number one choice.
Yeah, of course,
But as the clubs always do, look, if it was me, if I was Berta, I'd be saying let's get Gyokeres, because A, it stiffs Man United as well, and B, he's the most proven, more prolific goal scorer.
Yeah, fair enough. I think if you're Arsenal and Arsenal nail a top quality number 9 and an improvement on Gabriel Martinelli, which won't be difficult, I think they are a force to be reckoned with. And on that, Leroy Sané, who Arsenal were in talks with, is set to snub them for a £250,000 a week move to Galatasaray instead. So the hunt for that Martinelli
There's a bit of money in Turkey at the moment.
Well, exactly, mate. Yeah, the hunt for that replacement to Gabriel Martinelli goes on. Manchester City, Dino, big spread in the paper today about the changing of the guard at Manchester City. Jack Grealish and Kyle Walker both left out their Club World Cup squad, while all 8 or 9 of their brand new signings since January.
It's going to be hard to keep up with Man City this summer, I tell you. And the beginning of the season, I think when we go back to our other show, we're going to be having to have a list of who's playing where, because it's going to be quite a change up.
Yeah, listen, we're not talking about Tactics Exposed. This is the break from Tactics Exposed.
I can't help myself.
No, I totally agree. Rayan Aït-Nouri landed from Wolves, 31 plus 5.3 in add-ons. That one's already been done. Rayon Cherki, £35 million from Lyon, attacking midfielder, sort of forward type. Around the similar sort of money, £35 million deal in total, 30 plus 5. And Tiani Reinders has signed from AC Milan, £46 million, bit of a quiet one now. It's not a small amount of money.
They're all sort of typical City numbers, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like we'll buy 8 of them.
Omar Mamouche was 45.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you go back through. I think that they've got about 10 players who are 40 to 60 million that they've brought in. So look, I know.
I'd give my right arm for West Ham to sign.
Oh, absolutely.
5 players in that region.
But I know, like, all the other fans will be dancing around moaning that Man City are spending more money when when it's all not sorted out, and all of the however many charges it's ended up is still hanging over them. But they are. This is, and the headline is. I would admit freely that that's not the first time we've ever done the changing of the guard headline, but it's spot on this time, because if you're getting rid of Jack Grealish and Kyle Walker, and I got a feeling there'll be a couple more departures as well. I mean, there's one player who's interesting, is James McAtee in it as well, because he's gone with the under-21s to the Euros instead of going with City to the Club World Cup, and
he got Pep's blessing.
He
for
did,
that, didn't he?
But it kind of
captain
also says, well, you're not in the starting group, are you? So at some stage, I'm not saying he's on the level of Cole Palmer, but at some stage you've got to say, well, what Premier League club am I going to start in when I'm captain of England under-21s? But yeah, anyway, that's one for another day. But I love Cherki. What a fabulous player this boy is, and the attitude of it, the Old Trafford where he was silencing the crowd, and all of that went on and lost Leon in that game, but still, but there's the cojones, let's say, to be standing in front of the Man United fans and giving it that, and he's going to do that in a Man City shirt. He's the wild card player that I think they've been missing a little bit.
Yeah.
Look, they've got some quality players, in Savinho and Doku, and obviously you mentioned Marmouche, and obviously there's Haaland.
Husanov, Victor Race as well,
and they've missed Rodri massively. Yeah. But what I think, where Foden has gone off the boil a little bit, they've missed that sort of, you kind of know what all those players were going to do. They're very, very high level. Of course they are. I'm not downplaying the skill of Doku to go up the outside of someone or beat a player one-on-one, or it's going to go wide to Savinho and run at someone. Cherki is, what's he going to do next? And that could be elbow someone.
Yeah.
It could be rainbow flick it on the touchline and lose possession.
Yeah.
Or equally, it could, I don't know if you've seen some of the videos, but finish on both feet, wherever it comes, smack it in the side net.
The Gen Z highlights.
Absolutely.
Really.
And then do an Adebayor and run the length of the field and do a knee slide in front of the away fans. Yeah. That's what we're going to get from Cherki, and I can't wait for it. I'm here for it, definitely.
£280 million Manchester City have spent in 2025, and there was very much I know people are looking at Liverpool 300 million this summer, but there's Manchester City £20 million off of that figure based on 2025. There was very much they're starting their summer business early in January with Marmouche, Husanov. Again, chunky like lumps of money,
but they're very
not
good at selling.
Headline grabbing.
They're very good at selling, and you look at their net spend figures, and they're very, very good at offloading players, and that's where Walker and Grealish are going to come into it. I'm not pretending they're going to get 100 million for Grealish, because it's, you know, that's unrealistic. They paid that for him. It didn't work out. Pep's that sort of banged the creativity out of that one, but now I mean, who's not, if they've got the money, who's not going to be talking about 40 to 50 million for Jack Grealish? You know, he is another X-factor player. And if you can get the Villa Jack Grealish back again, and let's be fair, the Man City first season Grealish when they won the title, he's won 2 Premier League titles. Let's gloss over that. But look, Newcastle have got lots more games this year. Let's start with them.
Won the treble.
Yeah. And but Newcastle have got lots more games this year with the Champions League. They probably can't expect Barnes, Murphy, Gordon to go through seasons without getting injured with that many games. They need another wide creative player. I think he slots into them perfectly, because he could also play as the 10 off Isak.
Well, right, so Newcastle, Aston Villa, Tottenham and Napoli are the clubs that have been mostly linked with Grealish so far.
Can't see Napoli, can you?
I mean, Scott McTominay, energy.
Yeah, fair.
You see what he's gone out there and done? Absolutely loved.
Again, a
Billy
World
Gilmore
Cup year.
did it.
Is he gonna go to Italy and?
But would that maybe be a good thing? I mean, if ever there was a man who is going to be embraced by fans of Napoli, it is someone like Jack Grealish, isn't it? He's exactly the sort of maverick they love. All the grief Scott McTominay was getting from Manchester United fans before he leaves, they could have done with him for most of the season. Absolutely adored by the Napoli fans. But from an England point of view, as you mentioned, he's desperate to make his way back in. Thomas Tuchel does love Grealish, doesn't he?
He does.
He said that, but as we've seen in the news this week, he wants his players playing week in, week out for their clubs. If you're Grealish, then, well, first of all, from a club point of view, those 4 clubs I mentioned there, what do you think sort of most likely, least likely? PSR,
I think Newcastle's
for Villa probably.
Yeah, PSR is Villa other than Burnley are bottom of the PSR league, aren't they? I think so. Which is that's a bizarre new table, isn't it?
Claret and Blue struggles.
Absolutely, and all of a sudden we're looking at PSR tables and.
I detest it. Don't talk to me. Yeah, don't get me started.
As bad as XG, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Newcastle's the most likely. You know, Eddie Howe would get hold of him. He would be absolutely adored up there as well. You know, they love a maverick as well. You know, the David Ginola style, and go back to the Tino Asprilla type cult figures that they have at Newcastle, and they could make, you know, take him to their hearts straight away.
Where does he play? Anthony Gordon?
Yeah, I think
Harvey
he can play.
Barnes?
But that's what I mean. They've got to play more games. They've got options to have.
True,
you know, and also he can play in the middle. You know, in one of his best seasons at Villa, he basically played as like an 8 and just was everywhere. You know, and look, the Premier League is a bit more demanding now physically than that. But again, if his minutes are managed, he is fit as a flea as well. You know, and I'd love to see him stay in the Premier League. Look, again, with my Tottenham hat on, I'd love to see him at Tottenham, but they're waiting on managers, right? So I think there's a bit of uncertainty about what a manager would want out of Jack Grealish at Tottenham, whereas we know full well that Eddie Howe would absolutely embrace somebody like Jack Grealish. So look, if I was betting now, I'd say Newcastle. They've got the money, you know. They've got Champions League football, and you know nobody's going to get promised games, right? That's one of the most ridiculously overused phrases in the history of football. Like, I'm demanding minutes. Nobody's going to do that or promise that. But what you can say is that Newcastle are going to have a minimum 52 game season. Yeah. So, Anthony Gordon is not going to play 52 games. So, Jack Grealish can carry that load on both sides of the field.
Yeah, I mean, Murphy did a brilliant job for them, didn't he, last season? But
you like to think you need 4, right? If you're going to play that many games, you need to have 4 wide players. And look, assuming Isak does stay and they're in the Champions League and Newcastle price him out of the market, then Jack Grealish might be licking his licks at that as well.
Well, that's it, Dino, for the first episode of Transfers Exposed. Very much enjoyed it. Delighted I'm going to be back opposite you for a couple of times a week for the rest of the transfer
Well, let's
window.
hope we can talk about some Tottenham and West Ham signings at some point as well. That would be exciting.
Yeah, it would be exciting. I'm pretty sure we'll be able to talk about Spurs once Frank's appointment is confirmed, but West Ham I'm not so sure. But stay with us on Transfers Exposed for the whole of the summer. We'll be with you, Dino and I, twice twice a week on YouTube and all your major podcast platforms. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, following on all the podcast platforms as I mentioned, and we'll be here on Transfers Exposed twice a week until the transfer window shuts. See you next time.